Apple's playing field is the most uneven in the history of technology. This is according to the CEO of Epic Games, the maker of Fortnite, Tim Sweeney. We talked to Sweeney earlier this week about his concerns about Apple and Google as a duopoly, as he called it, as well as what Epic is doing to create what they hope to be fairer software practices around the world. Take a listen.
Well, first of all, we tried for about 3 years to have meetings with Apple's senior executive team, made a dozen requests or so, and they always turned us down. And so ultimately, I sent them a letter asking for exactly the right to process our own payments in Fortnite and the right to launch an Epic Games store, both through the iOS App Store and installable directly by users. And ultimately, they had a lawyer send us a letter saying no. I admire their forthrightness for giving us an answer, but that's in no way an acceptable situation for a platform for a billion users. You can compare it to a game console, but a smartphone and a computer are really unique. These are devices people use to conduct a large part of their lives and a large part of their business. In some cases, their entire business. And you can't have a tech monopoly dominating all interactions between consumers and businesses on a scale of billions of users. It just creates the same sorts of concentration of power problems as the railroads, right? And the early trust busters, fought the railroads over similar practices of tying services together, saying if you want to use our railroad, well, you're not allowed to ship oil because we're in the oil business, and so you can build your own, And these are disingenuous arguments that are aimed at supporting unfair business practices.
Now, here's what the companies are saying. Google says it's maintained and committed to operating in an open and principled way. Apple has said the complaints about the App Store are baseless from a handful of companies who simply want a free ride, don't want to play by the same rules as everyone else. We, Apple says, want to maintain a level playing field where anyone with determination and a great idea can succeed. What's your response to that?
Well, I think Google is in a better position than Apple. Google does have a semi-open platform where users can install software from means of their choice, but they use their agreements with OEMs and carriers to prevent actual competition. So that's our problem with Google. Apple is being entirely disingenuous. For example, every time we've communicated with Apple about our desire for an open platform and freedom to process our own payments, we've said we want this for the whole industry, not just for ourselves. And Epic does not want a special deal from Apple. We don't want a special deal from Google. We want wholesale policy changes affecting all developers, which free the software economy for everyone. And Apple's playing field is the most uneven in the history of technology products. The advantages Apple gives itself through its control of the operating system, and they have rules that outright say you cannot build software that competes with categories of Apple apps, which we view as key to our platform, right? This playing field between Apple Music and Spotify is completely uneven. Apple receives 100% of their revenue from their music service, and then they can use that to pay out artists. Spotify only gets 70%. So in negotiating terms with artists, Apple is in a 30% better position than Spotify. And it completely distorts the economy of apps.
So what do you want Apple to change?
Well, there are really two things. First of all, unbundling all of the services from each other. The software distribution service should be unbundled from the store so that you can install software from the web or from any other source. The payment service should be unbundled or untied from the store itself so that developers can use any payment provider they want. And totally support Apple's right to compete as a payment provider and offer their services and make their services as competitive as possible. Just they can't exclude all of their competition from that. And so these two things. Number one, make iOS and Android real open platforms where anybody can install software, and the software users install from other sources can operate on par with Apple and Google's own software. And number two, unbundle all of these services that are currently tied into a store, a distribution service, a payment processor, and everything else. Then you'd have a level playing field for everybody that's actually level.
Do you think Apple and Google should be broken up?
I think that's I think they should fix their policies and practices, and I think we should let the market speak for itself. Breaking a company up is the kind of the ultimate solution to a company that refuses to follow the laws and implement fair business practices. I mean, I would certainly hope that cooler heads prevail and that Apple and Google, instead of going through the process Microsoft went through, where Microsoft lost a decade fighting this antitrust case and then playing this passive aggressive game with their customers, with their suppliers, with the governments of the world to try to obstruct the settlement that was reached. I wish Apple and Google would just change their policies, and I wish they'd just free their engineers. Apple engineers know that the security of iOS comes from the fact that they have the best operating system kernel in the world and the best permissions-based security model in the world. The Apple engineers know they do not need a monopoly on software distribution to protect their users from malware. And if we just were to empower the engineers to make more of these decisions and stop the business guys from obstructing it all, I think the tech industry could solve this problem this year. By the end of 2020, we could have Google Android truly open to competing stores and iOS truly open to competing stores and all the payment stuff unbundled. And I think all companies would benefit. Apple and Google wouldn't lose the next decade fighting all the governments of the world in antitrust. And ultimately, I think their services would be better from competition. Look at Microsoft now versus the crappy version of Microsoft that existed a couple of years after the antitrust settlement. It's a far better company. It's a much more valuable company for shareholders. And most importantly, it's a fair company.